Welcome to GenVisibility interview series. We bring visibility to our genesis, geniuses, genealogy, generosity, and gentleness. You may feel isolated or alone, but you are not. We are a vibrant, thriving, creative, and amazing community. We are adventurers, trendsetters, and trailblazers. If you want to be part of GenVisibility, please submit our form by visiting our website, genvisibility.com. Your voice matters, your story matters, and we cannot wait to see you shine. Hey, KK.
Hi.
So let's start with the basics. What's your name?
My name is KK, and I use all pronouns. I prefer no pronouns, but if you're talking about me and I'm not there to police you, I'm okay. So I prefer you just use KK or talk to me directly.
Right.
So yes,
That makes sense. It's very annoying to be talked about and not being able to respond.
right. So you can use whatever pronouns when you talk about me because I'm not there. And
Yeah.
but I let people know I prefer my name, and
Yeah.
when you talk to me. That's it.
So, tell us a bit about yourself. Where you're at right now, the work you're doing, and then we'll start digging into your background.
Um, where I am right now is in a really wonderful, exciting, and terrifying place of transition. I've left this place I used to work at and gave like 150% of myself just because, I'm an activist and I fight for my rights. And I make a joke when I talk about the work that I do that I fight for my rights because I'm constantly needing to survive and advocating for myself. And so I might as well get paid for it. And that's sort of where this world has led me. And so prior to that, I was working with the National LGBT Cancer Network. I'm a member of the LGBTQ community. I had a terminally ill parent, and I can see how the healthcare system impacts queer people who get kicked out of their homes and really struggle to get health insurance and try to figure out how to survive and navigate the systems. And then on top of that, because of all the stress and rejection we experience, we tend to get sick earlier, get sick faster, and not have a foundation to get better. And I was like, well, that's also me. So that's where I spent like the bulk of my most, recent work history. And then with all of the stuff happening in 2020, I am an immigrant. I'm a person of color who has received many identities as I've lived in the US. And I just couldn't break myself up in pieces to fight for different pieces of myself. And so this new journey is a way to figure out how to get conversations for change and my activism to happen with all of my identities, and to have people talk about how it is we take care of a human and what we need to know about different identities to make sure that all humans have access. It sounds really complicated and difficult, but babies do it all the time. Oh, you need a seat? Let me give you one. I don't need to know where you were in the line if you're falling down. Just let me give you a seat. And it's just, I'm trying to take all of my skills over the last decades, because I'm old now, um, to bring together and put my skills into creating things that organizations can use and that people and communities can use to heal, to unlearn, and to sort of see the world as a place where we can all work together, because we all will survive and survive this if we do it together, and we can't do it in parts. So there's no definition for what I'm doing, to be honest, but that's what my goal is. And the conversation's been happening. And so it's a really exciting time to see people talk about queer rights, trans rights, trans rights for kids, which wasn't a thing before because you didn't know any out trans kids. So the world is changing, and we need to recognize that we have to change too, and that changes how we think. And so I'm working with some friends to build a community that's doing this unlearning, and we're going to work together to create tools for other communities to use it.
And so you're imagining, so first you're meeting with those friends and you're figuring out what process you together need to go through to create this support and this unlearning and these changes. And then once you figure this out, you'll try to help other replicate the process. Am I understanding this kind of?
Yes, and not replicate, as an exact replica, just more like understand what they need to unlearn. So we carry so much baggage of the ways we were raised and socialized throughout our lives, like even gender. Like I didn't pursue careers because that's not what girls do. Like I could have been the Indiana Jones of marine biology if the world was open for me, like I could have done everything. I could have, and to sit with that, as if you have that as your dream as an adult, you may not know it, but you have some bitterness around that. Like no kid says, I'm an accountant.
Oh, come on. Some people must love crunching number all day.
I do. I have a cousin that loves that. So yes.
Right. Did you love marine biology? Was that an area that you were kind of fascinating with growing up?
I grew up on an island in the Caribbean and I loved going to the beach. And I'm from Trinidad and Tobago has one of the most beautiful reefs in the entire world. Like it's recognized internationally by divers. And so growing up in that, environment, in a culture that enjoys having fun and partying, and then also watching Indiana Jones, just how do we bring this together? Like go on adventures and treasure hunting, and our history is filled with history of pirates. Like who doesn't want to be like looking for pirate treasure in the Caribbean? And so like that was my dream, and I truly love the ocean. My Instagram is full of sort of like wild oceans, National Discovery Sea, National Discovery Ocean, river monsters, and then a lot of drag queens. But I still follow my passions. I just didn't have the opportunities to do that because my parents were pushing me somewhere else.
Right. It is so true that when you mentioned like we might still be holding bitterness, like when you said that, I felt that squeeze, of like the ways what I thought was possible and what was what was off limit, and how we still hold tension around that. That's so true. What were your parents expecting you to be then?
They didn't have expectations in terms of what I should be, but they knew what I could not be, or what the world wouldn't treat nicely. And so they would be like, we don't know any marine biologists who are brown, or we don't know any of them who are women or from this country, because in the Caribbean, a lot of the scientists that come from other places in the world. So for them, getting their brains to just flex that muscle to see someone local being a doctor of something in the ocean outside of medical doctor was like, maybe that's not for you. Like, let's think about the other things. But
let's be realistic.
Yeah.
Let's just find a career that is attainable, that you can do. Like safety. It's like a safety perspective, which a lot of immigrants
right
have.
Yeah,
I don't know if your parents were first, second, third generation in Trinidad, but if
that's a really sad story. So like most of the people of color in Trinidad are brought through slavery or indentured labor, and so my grandparents have really sad, terrible immigration stories of basically enslavement, but because they're called indentured workers. And so there's also the added fear that I know that my family had around like education is the key to bring you up out of poverty and to like give you a better standing. It's not something our grandparents had or our parents had. And so, my parents were becoming like middle class and educated, and they were like, no, don't go into this random thing we don't even understand.
Right.
just get your education and keep moving up safely. Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
protection that harms, though. It's the protection that our parents have
Yep.
to keep us safe, that they sort of take their fears
Yeah.
and they don't put them on us, but they sort of trap us and contain us. And I am not someone to be contained.
No.
And, and I've always been this way, which my mother still
Yeah.
laughs about. Like, we have a weird relationship, but we talk about it. And she's like, I am just watching you and you still find ways to do the things you want to do that no one would
Yeah.
expect. And I was like,
So how
so
was
we'll
it for
see.
you growing up? Like, I am seeing you, this, wild, free, expressive child, super bright, but also, like you say, not very obedient and getting into trouble because they won't, KK won't just do what they're told to do.
Oh, goodness. I will say I was not obedient, but what
Yeah.
saved me was that I was well loved.
Mm.
And I was seen with, that child is so incorrigible, but just always giggling and happy and clearly surviving the risks that they're taking. Yeah, I have four sisters,
Oh,
and
wow.
my mother's the eldest of 10, and
Wow.
my father has this weird dysfunctional family, so we didn't get as close to them. But I was always like, no, why? I want to do this. And I would play by myself and imagine stories. I would get short haircuts just because I didn't have the patience to sit for my mother to comb my hair
Yeah.
before I went to play, or she'd constantly interrupt my play to fix it because it was a mess. So I was like, just cut it. And so
And
she
she let you?
did.
She did. Wow,
Yeah.
cool. Good.
Because my hair would grow quickly. And so that wasn't, luckily, I think that would also have been very stressful for me because I go back and forth from really short and really long. But it's more the practicality of it. And
Yeah.
so she would cut my hair and I would sneak into games with all the boys because they were pushing and fighting and imagining adventures. And I could be Indiana Jones. I could
Yeah.
be everyone on television. And, I could win. When they saw me as a girl, they would say I cheated when I won. And that pissed me off. And then I would get into fights.
Uh-huh.
And I wouldn't tell my mom. I had my own little adventure of
So
like
you
coming
were
home with
able
bruises.
so you were able to just sneak in and into, board games, even though I'm guessing it was a fairly small community. Like people just there would still be neighborhood or places where you wouldn't be known. People wouldn't be like, oh yeah, but that's KK.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be sneaking in. It was just sort of like um the way Trinidad is, it's not a very sort of like where we lived, we didn't interact with a lot of the people next door. They were older, they didn't have kids. Like we knew of them, but they wouldn't know like the kids
Okay.
because they would know our parents. And
Yeah.
when I went to school, I think they forgot gender up until I was winning too much.
Yeah.
We would play and they would get rough with me. And then there would be girls with longer hair or who were doing things that were really sort of like socially reflective of what people expected girls. And I'd be like, you can't play, you're a girl. And they'd be like, you're letting so and so play. And I'd be like, shh.
Yeah.
Just like, I finally worked to get here. Like,
They haven't
I don't
noticed
want to
me.
sing with you. I don't want to sing and jump rope.
Yeah.
Why? I could do that alone. Just
I'm so feeling you. I always wanted to be a boy. Growing up, it was like the amount of envy I had for boys. I just wanted to do the play the way they did. I only, also only role models that were boy of adventurers and just
right.
folks who did amazing things. They were all men. And I definitely remember that feeling. It was one of the strongest, especially because all the stupid stories that you fed as a child, the girls
Oh
are
yes.
just nothing that they're just. And also the message that this is how you get love. You get love when you're fragile and vulnerable and
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And I was just like, I'm not any of these things. And so I'm not going to be loved, you know, like that deep belief that like, well, since I can't fit those criteria and I want those criteria, I want those values. And then when you have those values, they're not even appreciated in you. So they're overlooked. So you don't get the positive
Right.
reinforcement because you're so smart or so strong.
I was lucky that my dad really wanted a little boy. And
Ah,
when he realized it wasn't happening, but he saw that I was better than, he would take me places and he'd be like, he'd tell the parent, like, this is my daughter or whatever, or
right.
this is so and so. And I would just go off and play with whoever the kids are. And I knew he was ridiculously proud when I would win or flounce them.
What kind of games were you playing that you could win? Like you're talking about
Like running
wrestling,
races, climbing
running,
trees. If we
super
were playing a
athletic. Yeah.
sport, I would win. Like, you tell me the rules and I want to win. and
I
I,
love
I
that.
still say it now. Like, I'll be driving. I'm like, Petra, we're going to win. She's like, who are you racing? I'm like, I don't know, but we're just going to win. Like, we're going to get there. I still do it. And he loved it. Like, he took me
Yeah.
places. And so it was
Yeah.
nurtured by him. And my mother was also excited for me, but she was always worried. And I think it was one of those things where the world is not safe for women or people
Yeah.
perceived as women. And
Yeah.
she knew it. And she would be constantly reminding him, like, you don't want her out there with just those boys and no grown-ups looking. Like, you don't know what can
Right.
happen.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
just like, what'll happen? I'll just beat him up. Like, just tell
Yeah.
me.
What are you worried about exactly? And so let's fast forward a bit, unless there is some like, I'm sure there's tons of nuggets from your, teenagehood, and feel free to share whatever comes to mind. But then when did you go to college in Trinidad? Did you move to the US? Like, tell me a bit more about, fast forward towards your young adulthood.
Well, like I mentioned, like, I had a terminally ill parent. So my father got really sick in my
Oh,
early teens.
oh wow.
And so throughout that time, I was still playing sports and I loved it and it was an escape for me. And I will say that I've been very fortunate to sort of love learning. There are very few subjects that are boring to me. I also hate school. So I love learning and I hate school. So I would run away from school. And, as I'm older now, I realize it's because I didn't see myself in the kids and I just hated
Mhm.
sitting in one place and being
Yeah.
forced to learn certain things. Like, I would go and read all the books on the school list and then sit in class looking out the window, and then eventually climbing out the window,
Yeah.
which I'd been caught a few times. So when my father was terminally ill, like, there were a lot of skiers where we thought, like this is it, he's going to pass, like, let's go to the hospital. And so, like, it would be my siblings and I and like some family members who could come in the last minute. And it was really like heart-wrenching as a child to be prepared to say goodbye and then it didn't happen. And then my dad kept fighting to, like, be there. And so for most of high school, I was in school, I was playing sports, but I wasn't really thinking about a future. And so when it came to sort of like make a decision, my mother sat with me, which of course she's very, very risk averse. I'm like, where's the risk? Let's go there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just, you know, um, we sat and she's like, what do you want to do? And this is what we can afford, because my mother had just spent all of their savings taking care of a very sick partner and now a single mom raising 5 girls.
Oh my
um,
gosh.
so I
Are
mean,
you the
luckily, yeah,
youngest?
I'm
Are,
exactly in the middle.
okay. Wow.
And yeah,
So you still had very young sibling when your dad
right.
passed.
Yeah,
Oh
so
wow.
she was more like, well, what can you do? And like thinking about a career that would also make me financially stable. And somehow Indiana
Right.
Jones marine biologist wasn't one she really saw. So she's like, look, he's poor when you look at where he is, like, he's just wearing the same clothes and just running through jungles. You want this? But so we sat and I was like really great at math and I loved math. And she was like, what do you like about math? And I was like, I think they're puzzles. Like, I treat them like puzzles and I want I want to win, which is solving the puzzle, or like I want to feel that sense of accomplishment.
I want to win.
I would just say it. I'd be losing, and I was like, I won. They're like, you won nothing. I was like, I feel happy, so I'm good. I won. And so I went to school for accounting, and I became an accountant, and I didn't want to sit in an office all day. I didn't want to crunch numbers, and so I became an auditor. And I started working at Ernst & Young, which meant I would be driving all over the country, traveling all over the Caribbean, going to different types of companies to do an audit, which for me was adventure and discovery. And I really enjoyed it, like, to figure out how they make candy at this manufacturing company and to walk through the processes, and then to see the processes in numbers for me was really exciting.
That's great. Yeah.
I was that kid, you gave them a stick, they would sit and play with it for hours. So clearly it's translated into these numbers.
Yeah, you find it's like you find your mind is so inquisitive and interested that you just find kind of the joy in everything, or maybe not everything, but you were able to really focus on all the learning and interesting new things that was going on in your job. You could have easily been bored and like, oh, okay, candy, but like you're like, oh, I can learn a new thing.
Yes, it's the thing where I'm like, this is what I have to do. Well, I'm going to do it to the best I can do it. And I'd like throw myself in it. And I was working so hard, where my mother was, you need to rest and you need to stop working on weekends. And the thing is, I was just like, that's how you advance. That's how you succeed. It's sort of like, being a lawyer in that first year of what you're trying to prove yourself to the firm. Like that's how auditing firms worked. And it was highly competitive and it was really prestigious. And, I wanted to be someone they gloat about. And,
this is a kind of negative side of your competitive spirits, right? It's it run you to the ground, part of being a competitive human being.
It was sort of like, I loved how people would quake when they said the auditors are coming.
Yes.
But I also loved talking to people and getting to know them and finding out what their work is. And like, you don't find fraud every day. And I found it once and I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to get more into this field and like, be that detective, for me, it's a detective. And I loved sifting through old documents and I love history and reading contracts. So it's just like, it sounds boring, but if you find something, it's not.
Yeah. Again, you apply that both the competitiveness and the inquisitive mind to make it fascinating. So how long did that last? And what was next? What happened next?
It was about 4 or 5 years. I was in it. I loved the adventure of it. And I was making money, which was exciting for me because it gave me more freedom, which is something I'd always wanted. So now I had a car and money. And it was sort of good community.
Where you liked your crew
I really did. Well, that's the thing with a small community is like you grow up together or you grow up in similar spaces. And so you could kind of understand people. And then being able to travel across the island sort of like helped me find people who were like me. So I found like an underground queer community.
Cool.
And it wasn't even that I was aware of what the language was to sort of label myself, because I knew I wasn't a lesbian and I didn't like that word. No. And I knew I wasn't gay, but I didn't like it. I just, and so I found people who were exploring these different identities that I couldn't read about in books, that I could find maybe a story on the internet or like a group to chat on. And then I found local people and it was great. And they sort of opened me up to sort of like how people were struggling or people were kicked out from their homes and working in the service industry, and friends were living together to make ends meet and they were just happy and they would throw parties. And I was just like, I have a car, I have money. How can I help you all? I will take you to your parties. I will help you plan your parties. I'm now on the planning committee of this party. Let's,
So is it that you didn't like the term lesbian or gay because those terms really didn't fit who you felt inside, or was it the stigma of that's attached to homosexuality that that you think made you dislike these terms and not wanting to be associated with them?
I
Did
think
you
it would
feel
be
judgment for the people that you met, in other words? Or
no, I didn't, not at all. It's one of those things about being just very inquisitive. I was already practicing what I practice now, which is sort of like a, agnostic Buddhism, where I would try no judgment. Because I know inside I was constantly being told what I should be, and I was always fighting it. Even as a little baby, like my mom has stories of me being a toddler, and she would dress me up in a dress to go visit my grandmother. And when she's looking for me, I'm naked outside in the dirt, and I buried the dress and I'm playing with it. And she was like, I just showered you and put you in a t-shirt and shorts, and you were the happiest thing ever.
Right.
And it wasn't even like she kept putting me in pretty things, and I was like, I can't do anything in these pretty things.
Right.
It's just
right.
But so I didn't have judgment for them, but I could see what I recognize now as my privilege. But at the same time, I was like also seeing myself and like, this could be me. And maybe if I didn't have, the mother I had who wouldn't get rid of her kids, if I didn't have a mom who just went through such a painful thing of losing her husband and her partner and then having to take care of him, that, maybe there would have been space for her to have emotions, to be angry with me and reject me in that way.
Right.
But it didn't happen in my teen years, right? So,
and your mom knew that you were queer.
I would say she knew, but she didn't accept it. Right. She would avoid talking to me about where I went, who I was with. But then with my other sisters, who were you with? Where'd you go? What did you do?
Right.
And so she knew, and I also didn't want to tell her, right? But she'd have these random conversations with like, you need to settle down, what you're doing looks dangerous, and you might need, and she would say like a boyfriend, and then she would say a partner, and then it sort of like evolved into, you might need a companion for life.
Yeah.
And
I love that. Right. Wow.
But
so you
meeting this community,
you had a happy life. You had a community, both friends from forever plus new friends that you belonged to in that specific way. You had a job that paid well and that was interesting. So there was really, it was a good time overall.
I wouldn't say it was a good time. I would say there were some things that I don't talk about. I mean, I do with my therapist, but I would say I had, for the most part, a very affirming community. Great. In that I could find an affirming community. I mean, I wasn't going to get it from my mother's family, who were very sort of like, this is what gender does. Right. And, I hadn't even approached what my partners would look like. And I didn't like those terms because there were boys that I was attracted to. There were non-binary people I was attracted to. There were women I was attracted to. And so I was basically starting to worry that I was just like, going to be this sort of promiscuous person with no, like, I was actually worried about it because I'm still getting the information of like religion and who goes to hell. And I'm just like, I am basically attracted to everyone. This is terrible.
So you knew non-binary people already. You were exposed to
I knew people who just didn't seem to want to choose.
Right.
And again, it's a lack of language. And in the Caribbean, like, we have our own cultural language. And the terms we may use might be insulting in the US because the need for labeling in the US is much stronger. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Trinidad, like, I was raised Presbyterian and Hindu, but we still fasted for Eid before we went to my cousin's house. Okay. And so all those religions coexist. And so as long as you don't come out and state who you are, which is a very individualistic thing, for the most part, people would see you and be like, that's just you, as long as it doesn't become something they have to care or be concerned about. So
Right.
coming out is a very Western American concept that, you know, it wasn't something we talked about. Like, it wasn't about coming out. Coming out is a big privilege to have that conversation. Whereas for most of them, it was like, how do we survive and pay rent?
Yeah.
And in it, being exposed to all these people, I realized, like, you know, and I know I wasn't, but I felt like I was being selfish, that here I was going to school and able to get this amazing job that was giving me freedom and I could get money. And I was watching people older than I was who didn't have access to these, struggling. And so I started to like volunteer at a rape crisis center. So it was at first a crisis center for people who had experienced physical violence. And so a lot of it were people from the community that I had met, the queer community. And I didn't put that together. And then I started drifting towards cisgendered women who were being assaulted, because I also, you know, no surprise, was practicing martial arts at the time. And so I was like, we can do self-defense classes with them.
Right.
And I realized as I was teaching these self-defense moves to these mostly young women, I was connecting with them individually, which I recognize is a really great gift I have, to connect with people. And I could see how, in doing something to sort of rethink their assault, they were learning about themselves, and I loved it. They became a really close-knit cohort.
Nice.
We would interact together. If someone's abuser was nearby, they would sort of rally as a team and like go support the person. And that came out organically from just the way the group interacted. And then the other groups I started teaching also started to build their own cohort. And I was like, this is what I'm doing. This is a gift. I love
Wow.
this.
You
It's really
notice that about
exciting.
yourself, and it's still true. You are a group creator. You are like, you bring people together and you kind of create, you create this bond and this, I don't know, the little bit I know of you, like it seems like even in the work that you're doing today and that you've been doing,
Yes.
this quality of bringing people together. And
Yeah, I do it. It's like I can spot a good team, and I bring people together and I help them build, you know, great team dynamics. And so I decided, you know what, I need to go to school and do something that makes me feel happy. And so I decided to study psychology, because I wanted to do also a field that was in its like babyhood. So it was another adventure to go out and create my own field. and and so I decided to go to college to study psychology, and I wanted to work specifically with victims of violence, predominantly women, because I feel like a lot of, like, I know now, and this is the language I have now, I did not have this when I was like in my early 20s. I can articulate that a lot of the violence that women have experienced throughout the years is the kind of violence that queer people experience, and I wanted to help my community.
right.
So the one that nurtured me and raised me and how I was socialized, and then the one that are my chosen family, my chosen community. And so I decided to go study psychology, and my goal was to look at eco-psychology, which is to use the environment and play and the ways in which people interact in nature
Yeah.
with each other to sort of heal and build their own coping skills, and not do sit in an office therapy, not do,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
any of that. But like in doing something and creating something, I feel like people can heal.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know this. You do this all the time, like creating things and like telling stories, and like that's
Right.
very healing.
Right, right.
Um,
We are stories, but yeah, there is healing that's done individually, with a therapist. That's valid. But then, we are not alone. We're not separated. We belong to ecosystem, whether it's our physical environment, our social, cultural environment. So yeah, it takes that too, that transformation of all of that. Those interactions can be really toxic or healing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
So
wonderful.
yeah,
And that was still in Trinidad. You were still home during that time.
right. Yes, but I started looking at colleges all over the world.
Yeah.
Um, and I decided on Atlanta because I thought it would be not cold enough at winter to scare me. I also, at the time, Atlanta was having direct flights to Trinidad. I was like, it's a
Nice.
shorter flight than the New York flight.
Yeah.
Very practical. So my mom
Yeah.
might have been proud. She was
Yeah.
terrified of me going away to school with no money. And I was like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Just, I'll do it. So I applied. I got in. I applied to one school because that's the one I wanted. I got in. Got a scholarship.
Yes. Nice.
And so then the conversation with my mom was like, well, I guess we will figure out a way to help you cover whatever other expenses you need since you've taken care of most of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to school for psychology. I went to an all girls college. I went to Spelman College in Atlanta, and
Wow.
I had 3 jobs and a couple under the table.
Wow.
My mom supported me, like to help me. I'll be like, Mom, I'm a little short. Just like she
Wow.
was
You were
amazing.
busy.
Oh, I was busy. And
But
then I
you were
started
also
organizing too. So
wow. But you were you significantly older than the college kids?
in terms of numbers, years, no, but in terms of maturity, yes, because I was probably like 24, and so they were like 18, 19, some were 20, but
Right.
they were coming straight
Right,
from,
right. That's
yeah,
significant at that age. You had worked for 5 years. I mean,
yes.
that's a major
So,
difference. Yeah.
so
So
like,
did you, but you found community anyway?
not directly there,
Yeah.
because
Okay. But you, right.
because there was a cultural difference too.
Huge, right.
They were like teenagers coming from home, and many of them
Yeah.
were from privileged families,
Right.
and I lost all of that privilege the minute I became an immigrant and was dealing with a US exchange rate. And
Yes.
I was like, goodbye, anything. What?
Yeah.
You have to buy fruit? You can't just pick it from your neighbor's yard? No one's going to bring you fruit. Just, what? I had to learn mangoes were exotic, bananas, well,
Right.
used to be exotic, but now they're like everywhere. And avocados were so expensive. And I was just like,
Right.
I grew up with one every day.
Right.
Take it
Right.
from the tree. I
But
just,
so even in all this busyness, you managed to go and seek community and find it. And there is a really great underground. I mean, the Atlanta, is
oh,
a really
yes.
vibrant city.
Yeah, I found it first with the international students who came with me. The exchange students were my age.
Oh,
And
cool.
so we formed a really close knit group, which still connects today.
Wow.
And we started to travel. We would take the bus, and Atlanta's not an easy place with public transportation.
No.
We would take a bus and walk however many miles to go see something that was in a book that we read about. And we did that. We formed a really tight knit group. And then the next year, we started bringing all the international students under a wing because we realized how left out there we were, because it was post 9/11. The Patriot Act had been passed, and I had been dealing with a lot of anti-Muslim hate because I have a Muslim last name. I look very sort of, I
Middle
could be
Eastern.
Pakistani, I could be
Right.
Middle Eastern, and my hair
Right.
was long at the time, and so I was definitely read as I was called a towel head. I was called a terrorist. I was
Right.
told to go back to some countries I had to go look up. And it was just really what people look like there. And yeah, so it was really tough. And then it was the time when they made the international student advisor, basically also the person who reported to, I think at the time it was USCIS, which is now ICE, where their
Wow.
students were and what they were doing and if they were working. And they had this ridiculous thing where um, you could international students could only get jobs on campus,
Right.
and you can only get a job even on campus if you had a social security card. a social security number, but you couldn't get a social security number until you had a job. And we had to fight and fight. And that was like my first real organizing in the US, was working with our international students. And, you know, I formed a really great collective. We had a very serious meeting with all the deans and the president, and we had a list of demands. And we talked to them about xenophobia and the racism we were experiencing. And, you know, our demands, which I'm really proud to say, is now part of the school process with international students, where the students can come in and they hold specific jobs related. So like if it's a job in the language department and the student speaks that language, like they should hold it for that student to be a tutor. And that's just one position. And in that holding of the job, we can get a social security number.
Great.
For that student, because we couldn't open bank accounts without social security numbers too. And so like the bank would be like, we don't know what to do with you. So
funny, I don't remember any of this in college in terms of like opening. I don't know why. I remember going to get my social security card, but I don't remember the step to get there. Maybe because I didn't have to struggle with that. I don't know. Or maybe I just waited that long. Anyways, doesn't matter. Interesting.
So yeah, so it was great. I will be 43 tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Nice.
I'm so excited. I celebrate my birthday every day, but tomorrow's the day.
So I'm like, we have been talking for like a while, and I have so many more questions. So I'm gonna like kind of tell you a bunch of them, so we can decide what feels like the most important to talk about, what you would like to share the most. So I would love to hear kind of like, so now you're like 25, 6, 7, right? You finished college and now you're almost 43. So like an overview of kind of like your development, you know, where you went at. But it seems like, you know, your passion for social change really gelled in, and you really, you know, you already knew, and then advocating, organizing. So a little bit more about that if you'd like. The other thing I want to know about your name, because we already talked about that in a different conversation. Like, I know this is a chosen name and you have a great story about it. So I'd love to hear that. And you also have a child. So I'd love to hear a bit about that. I don't know if you want to talk more about your gender journey, if that's something that you'd like to share more about. Yeah, those are some of the questions that it comes to mind. And I know there'll be more, but that's, you know, that's where right now.
I just, I mean, I met my first wife. It's so weird. I have two wives. First wife. I met my first wife in Atlanta, actually. After I graduated, I was working with the city of Atlanta, running sort of like their outdoor education program. And I would spend summers with kids from the city playing in the woods and doing my group thing and having fun. And, you know, I met a lot of conversation around gender there, because we had like a boys cabin set up and then a girls cabin set up. And there were some little girls who were like, I want to play what the boys are playing today. They're playing something else. And so when I first started, I used to volunteer in the summer with the city, which is how I found the job. I would say like, yeah, I don't want to sew. We're out in the woods. Like, why is this arts and craft for us? And they're getting to go, you know, build something. And so I would take the girls and then we'd go build forts in the woods. And then the boys would get jealous. And so when I met the programming, it was very gendered. When I left, it was just like, let's form the groups. These are the activities. The kids vote in the activities and we go and do it. And I was like, let's not do anything when the weather is perfect and we can be outside. Let's not do anything inside.
Yeah.
No inside things when we can go outside. And if we can't think of anything, we're just going to jump on the lake. And so I sort of did that. And, you know, I loved coming out of the summer, like really sunburnt and, you know, turning up in the city of Atlanta, like, oh, this is civilization. I've been living in a cabin for 2 months.
Yeah.
And my former partner went to grad school with some of those community members I made at Spelman, and they were all in a cohort together. And she's queer. She was a single mom at the time, and her son was 3. And I love children. I adore children, and I would talk to her about him. And as a single mom, she was always struggling and not thinking about a relationship, just more like finishing grad school and feeding her child.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we became a couple. One of those things where like, oh, let's try this.
Yeah.
And now I had this little person in my life. And so I had known him when he was like just turned 3. And like we fell in love. Like he and I fell in love instantly. The first time I went to her home, I made dinner with him because he wanted to help, where he was just really curious. And so I taught him. And then we were sitting at the table, and like he asks his mom, he looks at her and he goes, "Mom, could you take care of the dishes? I want to ask my new friend some questions." And so she was like, "What? Fine." And he's like, "Let's go in the living room." And so he takes my hand and we sit in the living room. And he's like, "I think if you ask my mom, she will let you stay the night. And you can't stay in my bed, but her bed is big. You can sleep with her bed. And then we could play in the morning." And I was just like, I didn't know how to have this conversation with him. And I was just giggling the whole time. And she was just like literally dropping dishes in the sink, trying not to bust out laughing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the first night I stayed there with him there, because we were being very careful, because we didn't want a young child to like become attached to a person.
Right. If it wasn't going to work out.
It wasn't going to work out. Plus, it was the complicated thing of us having very similar friends. And so if it got yucky, it'd be really hard for us to find the support we needed. And that's my son. Like he and I bonded. He thought I was there for him. I really created a family with the two of them. And, I will say I loved my ex-wife and I wish her the best. But in meeting this little person who looked up to me, like he started to call me KK as his own little nickname thing to show affection. He didn't want anybody else to have a name that I didn't like. And I didn't even know I didn't like my name. I would just sort of like, have other nicknames that I've used throughout my teen years. Like I had friends that called me Kay, friends that called me Carrie. I have 2 middle names that I think are beautiful, and they're women's names, but I love them because they're really culturally tied to my people and my ancestry. Right. And, my first name was, it's that protection my mother tried to give me and I'm rejecting it. I'm like, I don't want a safe thing. Right. So she gave me a very anglicized name to protect me for when I want to do jobs so people don't see me as different.
Right.
But then I walk in and they're like, "Oh, hello." Is this your real name?
Yeah.
And so my son called me KK, and he even reminded me yesterday that I'm his mom. And so throughout the years of nurturing and loving this little human, like so my ex-wife's name is Jenny. So Jenny and I moved from Atlanta to New York because schools in Atlanta were really bad.
Right.
At least the public schools. And to get into a private school, like we might have a chance as a queer couple, but at the time I was on an H-1B visa. And we were slightly terrified that if we said that we were a couple, it would be held against me for my visa.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because you can't have stronger ties in the US than you do in your home country.
Gotcha.
And a partner and a child seems like a stronger tie.
Yes.
And so it was a really scary time because it was still post 9/11 and very soon after the Patriot Act. And they were cracking down on like who people perceived as Muslim or terrorists. It was a big fear. I mean, it still happens. And so, we made the decision that New York would be the place. And we moved to the Hudson Valley because, we were in Westchester And we're like, you can work and go to the city. It's an easier commute than anything we could afford in the city. And the space we would get here is much more than we would have in the city. And like, we both prized nature and being close to it. And so our little threesome moved to New York, and I was able to work in a similar job working with kids out in nature.
Nice.
Very serendipitous. I'm like, this must be the place I have to be. Like, I came to visit a weekend because for the first year they moved up, and I was going to figure out how to get there because my visa is tied to my job.
Oh, wow,
and I flew up one weekend, and I was flying out every weekend. I was using every single point I had earned, flying back and forth to Trinidad and flying in and playing with Jaden, doing his birthday parties, meeting all his friends, and all his friends were calling me KK because they were meeting me as KK. Their parents were calling me KK, and like, that was my name. Like, I knew who these people were based on how they called me. I'm like, my son. Just I wasn't introducing myself as such.
It's such a
because
beautiful right, like we said, it's such a beautiful way to come to your name, that it comes from that love, that very special love that your son had for you, that this is how your new name, your official name now came to you.
It brings me such joy because he would sing my name, like when he was playing, or I did something, you'd be like, KK is so awesome, KK. And you'd be singing it.
Is he still
so beautiful?
That's super sweet. Is he still local? Do you get to see him regularly?
No to both. He is a young gentleman. He's 17. He lives in San Diego. With his biological dad and sometimes with his biological mom. Sorry, we're a very modern family. We text parents, and so his biological dad, John, and his wife are on the parent group, and Jenny and whoever she's dating, if they're dating long enough, they get in on the group. And sometimes Petra, but otherwise Jaden's old enough to do a lot of things. He has flown out a couple times. Excuse me. And then he was like exploring. He's very beach surfer boy.
Right. So he's happy in San Diego.
He's very happy.
Like you guys have a close relationship still.
We do. I'll call him out and like, I see you have a partner. And if he sees this, he's going to blush so hard. I was like, I see you have a partner. I don't want to be a grandma before I'm 50.
Yeah.
So please use condoms. Please be responsible, and no is no. And so this is what I'm texting him. I'm just like, no means no. Always wear a condom. But if it happens and you do make me a grandma before 50, let's talk.
Yeah. And so things didn't work out with Jen, and now you are married with Petra. And are you thinking about children, or this is because you said you love children? Are you think this is
love children, and the desire was one, like, so I think I told you in our first interview, sort of like, my gender is not complicated. I just want everything. Which has been my theme as a child, like, so I want all the body parts, and I also want to be pregnant.
Yeah.
And I had raised so many children, like all the kids at the summer camp, children of friends. Like, I still talk to them. I take trips and I visit people with kids I've raised. I have kids who text me when they're having problems with their parents, and we'll talk. And I had never felt the need for a biological kid. I just really wanted to be pregnant. I just wanted to feel it. And what sort of happened was that my youngest sister had this beautiful little baby, Addie, who is famous on my social media. And I was holding a little baby that looked exactly like me. None of my other nieces and nephews looked so much like me. Like, it looked like I was cloned.
Wow.
And like, I would just look at her, and my sister would be like, I don't know how this happened.
Right. And you felt that calling, that genetic calling, that was
Yes.
like, pass on your genes.
Well, I don't even know if it was genetic. It was more so to see myself as a baby.
Right.
And then she's this radical, rambunctious little thing that when she starts following rules, I say, stop. What's the consequences? Oh, someone told you to? Break it.
Yeah. Your sister must love you.
She does. She also calls me every day.
That's
And
amazing.
she's like, could you not tell her this? Because I have to deal with the repercussions. I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's
nope.
what I'm saying.
Like, that's your job as a parent. And my job
Is
as someone who
Auntie.
loves her is like, the world is going to beat her down. I'm just giving her the skills that she needs.
Right.
And if she can't break rules with you, how is she going to stand up for the rules that really hurt her? And my sister's just like, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, go
well,
ahead.
Yeah, she gets it. No, I was just gonna say I just called you auntie, and I realized I don't know a gender neutral word for uncle or auntie. Is there? What do you use? You just don't use. They just say KK.
Well, that's the thing. I am non-binary, so I'm okay with auntie. I don't have anyone who's called me uncle, and most of the kids call me KK.
KK. Right. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to check in because
So
it's interesting how some words have not yet developed, a gender neutral.
no one ever says auntie KK. So
Yeah. Got you. So you think all of this was, do you think you might still then have a biological child or
well, what I was saying is that I didn't
adopt?
feel that way. Petra and I both love children. We have a lot of friends with children, but one of the harshest things for us to come out of the pandemic and isolation is we missed holding babies.
Yeah.
Like, we literally both have aches of not hugging a little one or kissing one of the kids we love, because we see them and they're like, no, the germs. And we're like, we don't want to teach them that to make the exception. Right. So, I mean, when my niece is here, she's in our pod, she's like crawling all over us and we're cuddling.
Nice.
But we want diversity in our cuddles. So,
yes.
We were talking about it, but it's also, we're at a point in both of our lives and careers where we're like, I don't know if we're ready to make that commitment. Like, I've done it once before and it was so much fun, but I also, it's a lot. And we both want to travel. Like, Petra wants to see family in Australia. She's Australian. I want to take Petra to Trinidad so she meets my family. And those things are expensive and we can't do them in a short space of time. Like, we have to plan them out, and we both want to travel. So we seriously sat, and Petra's parents are going to see this, and sort of like said, I was like, what if we foster? So it might be something when things are open, we foster. And I was like, I don't, I have a lot of kids that I've raised at places I've worked who still reach out to me, and some of them have come out as queer and they've been rejected by their families. And so I'm basically their parental unit. Right. So there's a lot of those out there. And if we open our heart to the foster system, there's going to be more of those. And emotionally, I don't know if I could add to that load. I have two that are constantly in trouble. Right. And when I say trouble, I mean jail or hospitalization, because it's really hard to be different. And so I was like, what about fostering babies? And what if we need to foster babies who are sick? Like, that's going to be another heart-wrenching thing, but I think I have space for it. So we're still talking about it. There's a secret dream of me giving up all of my activism and having a food truck for reproductive justice. And if you bring your baby and I get to hold it, it's free food. So
nice.
I'm all about creating the things I need to see. So we've talked about it. We both love children. And I don't know. It's such a complicated thing because we're also career people who were.
What does Petra do?
Petra's magic. She's an independent contractor, and she works in program evaluation. and monitoring and evaluation. And so primarily she's worked with the United Nations. So she travels to war zones.
Wow. Wow.
So in the pandemic, we haven't done that. This is the
Right.
longest we've ever been together in the same country and under the same roof.
Wow.
And luckily we
Wow,
still
wow,
like
wow.
each other.
Amazing. That's a good sign. That's a good sign. They
Yeah.
say the pandemic broke a lot of marriage, but also, or relationship, but also strengthened. You know, it was kind of
Yeah.
the make or break
We're
marker.
so
You know,
lucky in this.
yes, so lucky. Well, you know, I don't know if it's luck. I feel like the thread that I'm really feeling in your life, you know, outside of you, KK, and your little temperament, you know, like who you are. I feel like the thread is really love. Like you are, you know, kind of overflowing with love. You were loved deeply. And I'm not saying it was perfect, but you were
Mhm.
deeply loved, deeply held. You had community, you had friendship all through your life, you know, like so much, so many connections, and you know, and you create connections that are meaningful and that last over time. And all of that is, you know, all that love, there's a lot of joy and happiness. And again, I'm not saying you have no suffering. And interestingly, it didn't, we right with this conversation lasted now more than an hour, and we haven't really, either by choice, maybe this is not your style, but we haven't really discussed, you know, deep times of suffering or being lost. Like, you know, I feel like the thread is really this joy and love. And I think it's so interesting. You know, a lot of people come to activism, to social work, to psychology, to healing work from a place of pain. And I feel like you come to it from a place of love. And so it really, I think it makes so much sense that you're moving to this holistic, you know, wholesome way of looking at transformation and healing. You know, because so much of, you know, and maybe you disagree with me, but I feel like too much of this important work is done from a depleted place, from a broken place, and that creates its own problem for the people involved and for the work itself. And so I feel like that new approach that you're trying to develop, one that is really considering all of your part and all of the part, and you know, it kind of makes a lot of sense to me, because that's a really loving place. So anyways, I just wanted to share that in our
Oh,
conversation.
well, I just want to say thank you for seeing that, because I do love people. I love people ridiculously, which is why I tell people I'm a hermit. Like
Mhm.
I'm really great at being an extrovert and connecting with people, but I have to be a hermit because like I love people and they know it. People come up to me and talk to me and tell me things. I cannot count on my fingers how many times people have handed me their baby while they did something important.
Yeah, you
They're
know, I
like,
also feeling that you have so many people that think of you as their best friends. You know, I have friends like that where, you know, 100 people are like, "Oh, KK is my best friend," you know, because
oops.
they get that connection, and you just like, "Oh, okay."
And I have suffered significantly. Like, you know, I've had abuse in my childhood. I've lost a parent. I've lost former partners. And I think that sort of like, I'm going to win it has turned into, I have to fucking fix this
Right.
because I don't want it to happen. I lost one of my really best friends 2 years ago. He was like
Oh man.
36, 2 master's degrees, living in London, beautiful gay man. And he was HIV positive and he died alone of AIDS.
Two
He's
years ago,
36.
I thought
Yeah.
AIDS was no longer fatal.
It's, it can still be. If you get sick, like your immune system is compromised, like you can still
Mm.
die. And people are still dying from AIDS in other countries. But
Well, that I right.
I love him. I still love him. I remember him every birthday of mine, his Christmas, because he would send me a card every time. And I would
Wow.
always mess up his birthday because he was like the 26th. And I would be so excited of not forgetting it for Christmas. I'd tell him that like 2 weeks before. I'm like, I will forget. So I'm
Yeah.
telling you now. And then the day comes and I forget. And then the day after, I'm like, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yeah.
Just I wonder if it is the 26th and I'm also messing it up, but it's like just around Christmas and I always miss it because it's Christmas.
Yeah.
And, you know, I watched his family reject him all of his life
Oh man.
and then not know how or why or who he was when he died. And that was 2 years ago, and they took his page off of Facebook, which was the only way I could go look at pictures of him and grieve.
That's so
And they did
upsetting.
that because of me, because I did a tribute for him and donated to AIDS. They have not told his mother that he died of AIDS. And
Wow.
that kind of stuff
That's
is
so
what
sad.
fights my fire. Like
Right.
you need to see people for who they are. You need to
Right.
see who they are. And so my love goes quickly to rage and anger and then fix it energy in
Right.
no time. If I love you,
Right.
I'm there. Like I will be your fiercest, partner in crime. And you can
Right.
take a rest while I do it, right? So, and I will do it. Like I will be there. And so the love I have is that I've had many a miss at death, mostly for trying something my mother said I shouldn't do. I've kayaked a hurricane, not the best idea.
Right.
Didn't come out of it too bad. So
Wow.
there's that. Like, I've had close, opportunities for things to go really wrong for me. And
Right.
I've been fortunate. I've survived or I've thrived. And then I hold space for people. And so, I don't see my gender as separate from who I am. I think it's just all of me has not been fully seen as I was negotiating through life. And now people are seeing it because now I'm talking about it. And now I'm not, and there was still fear. Like I was still afraid of rejection.
Right.
And I think, I didn't blossom under this name that Jaden gave me because I was being held back by a system because, I was in the process of becoming a citizen, and it would get harder and harder to use this name that didn't feel like me.
Right.
And then it's on, I'd have to change it and go through all the hassle
Right.
to like prove it. So,
Right.
I became a citizen last year, and I just told Petra, the last leash is off.
Yeah. Now you
Like,
can have your name. You can be fully, you can
no,
embody
yeah.
all of you
Well, I could change
instead
my
of still.
name. I can like really push the envelope about what I can say and where I can say it
Right.
in a country that I've lived in. I think now maybe longer than the one that I was born in.
Right. Right. You know what's
And yeah,
sorry,
no, go
but
ahead, go ahead.
we're just thinking that in some ways the fact that you say that your gender is simple, that you want it all, might be also the reason why you did not need to um to I can't think of the right word, but like you were since you didn't have intense dysphoria, for instance, really hatred for your body or feeling like you were constantly misgendered, you didn't need to make that a priority earlier on, or you didn't have to completely disconnect from who you were in order to function. Like there was more of an ability to be in that, to fluidly move from space to space, but not have that so much as a priority. So it could kind of come to this full embodiment, when it did, like, more recently, because there wasn't, and again, maybe this is wrong, but you feel like
No,
maybe
no,
there wasn't as
no.
much as an urgency to it
I
earlier on.
think I think it's really sort of cultural and in the context where we live, because I grew up with people who grew up with nothing, and most of the community were people who had nothing. They came from a history of indentured labor or
Right.
enslavement.
Right.
And so to be able to have property and have a house is just like a slowly rebuilding of who they are as individuals. And I think when you're in a culture of people who've experienced such trauma, that how you decide to express your gender is not a priority. For some people it might be, but like you're
Right.
looking to feed people, take care of people, or a next hurricane or a next natural disaster could wipe you out, or an illness can wipe you out. And you're also in a culture that's new and not built on preserving the privilege and wealth of a few.
Right. Right. Right.
um, it's definitely sort of, there's definitely racism, there's definitely privilege, there's definitely colorism, but the system as it operates wasn't created to do that. And when you come to the United States, it is a system of oppression. Like, it was the only way that white male patriarchy could get all of this privilege and wealth. And so this entire system was created to suppress people. And to survive in this system means you have to find out who's the persons underneath you to suppress them. And that includes gender. Like, gender was a big part of it,
Right.
And I think here that sense of urgency is a sense of survival.
Right.
And what you need to do to survive. Because the more research I do, the more people I talk to, and the older I get, I can see that, if you don't look a certain way and do certain things, the system is built to force you into it.
Right.
And queer people are magical unicorns. They keep saying no. And they're like, I choose to be me.
Right.
I choose to be the person I want to be, not who you
courage.
say I must be. And
Right.
it's a beautiful thing. And it is so freeing to find community that sees you as you are. It is so freeing to be yourself. And it's like, I think of that journey of a caterpillar to butterfly. Like, if anyone, if you want to be the most beautiful butterfly, you have to push your way out of that cocoon, because then the fluids and the strength in your wings really come to fruition in that process.
Yeah.
And I look at people struggle and my heart breaks, because it shouldn't be that way. There are people starving. There are children being, marketed all across this world for different reasons. And I'm just like, if you want to use a different pronoun, like, fucking let me practice it.
Right.
If you want to get married to another consenting adult or someone of a different race or religion,
yeah,
excellent.
What's the big deal?
Your rights, your access, take nothing from me.
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like, from my perspective as a straight, a cis white privileged, being, I find that the queer community, I guess the gender diversity, neurodiversity, able body diversity, like all of that is really freeing of all of us, because these containers, these standards that we all have to abide by, these communities are breaking them and are allowing each of us, to have that freedom to fully express ourselves, when there is so much rejection of all of us are being limited by what it is to be normal, what it is to be in our gender, what it is, etc., right, what it is to be attractive. Like, we all have these standards. And so I love, it's a lot of unfair work and responsibility to be providing this service, but it is really, I feel, in the process of being themselves, freeing themselves, refusing to fit in, it is opening for all of us this space. So that's what comes up for me. I'm going to let you finish with whatever you want to say, so that we can wrap up. And I just want to say that I am now a fan of KK. I've joined the ranks of fanhood. I'm sure. And I totally want to be friends with you too. And I was like,
most of my fans are under 6, but
you win me over. So go ahead and tell what last words, what you want to share before we wrap up.
I just want to say, for me, there are things that I hold on that keep me through the day. And I'm just being a weirdo and being a freak is a gift. And no one who has ever followed the rules created anything amazing or different. And it's all the rebels and all the people who said, no, you can't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it, have invented things. And it's been people of color, it's been immigrants, it's been women, it's been old people, it's been children there's like children inventing things now, and that's what having a freer society does. And things that make you feel contained are not good. There's a difference between security and containment.
Yes.
And if you feel contained, I say walk outside, like get outside, take that step and move, because I love being a freak. I love being a weirdo. I think that was the worst thing my mother could call me when I was growing up. She's like, you're so weird. And now she's just like, you're so weird. And my niece, who's now 8, is like, yeah, we're weirdos.
Great. That's wonderful.
And if it's not working, I'm like, break it and do something else.
Yes.
Just build something new. And I feel like non-binary identities and people who are fluid are magical. Like, I really think it's magic. Like, it must be magic to see yourself in a world that tells you don't exist.
Yeah.
Like, think of that imagination. Like, that is
Yes.
creativity. And if you had freedom to use that elsewhere, you could be curing diseases, but instead you're, healing yourself, which is not a bad thing, but imagine if you didn't have to.
Right. I know.
And just like,
All that
break the
energy.
containers,
Right.
break the rules.
Yeah.
If someone
so much
says no,
energy.
ask them why.
Yeah.
I'm like, always ask why.
People don't like that, but yes.
Oh.
Exactly.
Mine are why, and then, but what if?
Let's consider another way.
I'm teaching my niece forgiveness and not permission. And we're working on that right now. It's an actual lesson that I have with her.
What? I love that so much. Well, you are fantastic. And so grateful for this time to speak with you and just for the work you're putting out into the world. Thank you for being part of this.
Thank you for being here and for listening. We hope you are feeling inspired to share your own experience and reality. If you like this video, please share it. You can follow us and hear about our latest video on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And remember that you are valued, you are loved, we see you.